The top 5 grammar mistakes that are keeping you from getting to the B2 level from the B1 level. Now, you can probably understand basic grammar rules in English, but when you speak in English, I'm willing to bet that it sounds a bit broken. Speaking broken English is one of the indicators that you are still definitely around the B1 level of English. And being stuck at the B1 level of any language can be very frustrating. Sometimes it can feel like you're stuck in jail. The B1 level of English is around that level where you can understand most of what you hear, but you still can't really speak confidently without making a bunch of noticeable grammatical errors. The problem is that you're now making intermediate mistakes instead of beginner mistakes as you're transitioning from the A2 level up to the B1 level. In this video, I'll show you the 5 most common grammatical errors that people make at the B1 level so that you can finally increase your level of English. Now, first of all, to kick this off, you guys really need to understand the difference between textbook English and English in the real world. Now, to illustrate this, I'm going to tell you a story of someone who I helped with their English. For the sake of this story, let's just call him Joe Blow. Now, Joe had just finished transitioning from around the A2 level of English up to the B1 level of English. Now, Joe actually did a pretty good job of learning grammar and learning a good foundation for his English. He really understood the differences, or the main differences, between his native language and the English language. However, when he was around the beginner level, he really lacked a lot of experience actually applying the vocabulary and the grammar that he learned to real situations in real life. And Joe put a lot of time into listening to English media so he could actually understand, he could even understand fast spoken English pretty well. It wasn't bad at all, but he really could not speak in a fluent manner at all. And it wasn't even necessarily just about his pronunciation. It was also because he really could not differentiate between the English that he learned out of a textbook when he was learning his grammar and his vocabulary versus the English that a native English speaker like myself uses when I use slang, idioms, and a bunch of made up words that English speakers use all the time in conversations with one another. Now, the moral of the story is not just put aside textbook English and just focus on real world English. The true answer is you need a combination of both. I would say just learn real English, like the way I speak it and the way that other native English speakers speak it, but that's not really great for your learning. You're not going to be able to actually get to that point without first understanding essential grammatical rules that will stop you from sounding broken when you speak in English, or will stop you from speaking broken English, period. So let's go over 5 common grammatical rules that you need to avoid making, especially at the B1 level. Now, the first mistake is the simple tense trap. The second mistake is confused conditionals. The third is the article blind spot. The fourth is imprecise prepositions. And the fifth is weak modal verbs. Let's break it down. Now, English speakers at the B1 level tend to overuse simple tenses. And this is something that is extremely noticeable by native English speakers such as myself. A classic example of this could be when someone says, I work here for 2 years. Now, a B2 speaker would say, I have worked here for 2 years, which is the correct way to say it. This might seem small to someone who doesn't speak English as a first language, but I'm telling you, as a native English speaker, this is extremely noticeable, and it really will make a difference between whether some native English speakers take you seriously when you speak versus if they don't. If you don't want to sound like you're speaking broken English, small mistakes like this actually make a really big difference in how you present yourself when you speak in the English language. In other words, it's a small change that makes a really big difference. So pay attention to not overusing simple tenses. Now, for the second common mistake, confused conditionals. Now, B1 speakers often mix up second and third conditionals. For example, A B1 speaker would say something like, if I studied more, I will pass the exam. A B2 speaker would say, if I studied more, I would pass the exam. Just the difference between learning how to use the word will versus would actually makes a really big difference in how you sound when you speak in English. Which leads to the third mistake, which is the article blind spot. This is also extremely common. A B1 speaker would say, I want to be a doctor. It is hardest job. A B2 speaker will have way better control over a, an, and the. And honestly, this kind of just comes down to experience. People who are really good at using prepositions are simply just more experienced English speakers. A B2 speaker would say something like, I want to be a doctor. It is the hardest job, or it is the hardest job. B2 speakers know when to use a definite article for situations like these. And keep in mind, even if they don't address or title these rules in their head like this, they can still just sense when to and when not to use words like this, just through experience, just through repetition of listening and speaking in English, which is something that the B1 speaker unfortunately just doesn't really have yet. This leads to the fourth mistake, which is imprecise prepositions. This one can be really tricky. A B1 speaker, depending on what their native language is, might say something like, I am really good in English. But the B2 speaker would know the correct collocation and they would say, I am really good at English. This, once again, is something that is a little bit difficult to memorize, but it really is something that just comes with experience. You'll clearly be able to observe when this is used and when it's not used. And this leads to the fifth mistake, which is weak modal verbs. B1 speakers often use must or have to for everything. And just in general, B1 speakers have a very limited use of the verbs and the phrasal verbs and modal verbs that they know how to use. A B1 speaker might say something like, you must practice every day. Now, people will understand what you're saying, but sometimes it can just come off the wrong way depending on the context by which you use it and the tone that you actually deliver it in, too. A B2 speaker would understand these nuances. A B2 speaker would say something like, you should practice every day, or you may want to practice every single day. It sounds more smooth and more natural. It sort of sounds like how a native English speaker would actually articulate something like that. And then someone at the C1 or C2 level might say something along the lines of, it would be in your best interest to practice every day. They'd use a expression or an idiom or something like that to connect the sentence. So to recap, the 5 mistakes that you need to be aware of are the simple tense trap. Number 2, confused conditionals. Number 3, the article blind spot. Number 4, imprecise prepositions. And number 5, which is weak modal verbs. Now, in a nutshell and simply put, the solution to avoid making all 5 of these mistakes is simply having a nice balance between continuing to improve your English grammar and vocabulary through a textbook while also learning by observing and applying skills in the real world with native English speakers. You should have a good balance of both. At the B1 level, you should understand all of the basic foundational grammar rules in the English language, but you need to keep in mind that you're still not done yet. There's still more grammatical rules and more vocabulary and expressions that you really need to learn how to apply properly, especially as you're coming into the intermediate levels of English. By combining the two with textbook English and real world English, it will help you get to the B2 level a lot more efficiently. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like the video to let the YouTube algorithm know that this type of content is helpful for English learners around the world. And also be sure to leave a comment down below telling me where you're from and what your native language is. I always love to know, and I'm always curious to know where you guys are watching from. Now you know the most common grammatical errors that people make at the B1 level that is holding them back from getting to the B2 level. If you want a quick and easy 30-minute per a day study plan that will help you increase your level of English, be sure to watch the next video on the screen.